welcome to Reading the Bible is Easy-ish. Happy Monday, and thank you for joining us again. My name is Harrison Litzel, and today we have Reverend Emily Harbin with us. Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're from, where you find yourself in ministry right now.
Thanks for having me, Harrison. I am originally from Dalton, Georgia. I grew up at First Baptist Church there, and then attended UGA for undergrad, wound up at McAfee a few years later, and now I serve at First Baptist Athens in Georgia as the minister to students and young adults. So it's kind of youth college and young adult ministry.
Yeah. All right. So Emily and I, we went to school together. We went to McAfee together, started there in 2017. I was trying to remember, Emily, I don't remember when we first met, though I believe it was just at orientation at some point. But we went through all 3 years there together. You working in Athens, I think there were a few semesters where you were kind of away, focusing on that work a little bit. And then, of course, we graduated in the middle of the pandemic. And so that kind of interrupted our time together as well. That's how Emily and I know each other. So Emily, tell us, when you read the Bible, are there certain tools that you kind of are drawn to or practices when you start reading the Bible?
Yes. So while I was at McAfee, I had the opportunity to take a couple preaching courses at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, and got to take a course with Dr. Anna Carter Florence, and she's written a book called Rehearsing Scripture. And in that book, and in her other kind of intro to preaching book, she talks about reading a passage and finding the place in the passage that grabs you, that bothers you or troubles you, stirs up a question in you, or brings like an immediate sense of encouragement. And then I kind of sit with that question or that phrase that bothers me for a few days. Pay attention to things going on around me in the news or in my own community, or hear stories that come up in my ministry. And then I kind of revisit the text. And I'll just read through it multiple times throughout the week and see if that same piece still grabs me until I can kind of work through it and find a solution.
Yeah, I'm always encouraged to hear other people who read the text and then kind of walk away for a little while. I think that is definitely my practice, and it's always encouraging to hear other people. And I appreciate what you said about like paying attention to what's going on in the world. I think that there's this temptation to read a text and then to ignore everything else going on because you're just trying to focus on the Bible. But I think it's great to listen to what else is going on around you. And seeing how that kind of connects to whatever it is that grabs you from the text. Yeah, I like that. So we talked about today we're going to read from Mark. That is the lectionary text for this upcoming Sunday, Mark chapter 5. Emily, you chose the Common English Bible. Is that a Bible that you use regularly? Is that one that you're familiar with?
It's just a translation that I refer to, especially with student ministry. I find it's a pretty helpful translation. It's relatable, and so I thought that would be fun. It's not one that I usually preach from, but.
Gotcha. Yeah. I have not spent a lot of time with this translation, so I'm excited to kind of see it. And I knew that you working with students, that was probably part of your experience with it. So we will read Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43 will be our passage today, reading from the Common English Bible. Jesus crossed the lake again, and on the other side, a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Jairus, one of the synagogue leaders, came forward. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded with him, "My daughter is about to die. Please come and place your hands on her so that she can be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A swarm of people were following Jesus, crowding in on him. A woman was there who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a lot under the care of many doctors and had spent everything she had without getting any better. In fact, she had gotten worse. Because she had heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes. She was thinking, if I can touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Her bleeding stopped immediately, and she sensed in her body that her illness had been healed. At that very moment, Jesus recognized that power had gone out from him. He turned around the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "Don't you see the crowd pressing against you? Yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus looked around carefully to see who had done it. The woman, full of fear and trembling, came forward. Knowing what had happened to her, she fell down in front of Jesus and told him the whole truth. He responded, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace, healed from your disease." While Jesus was still speaking with her, messengers came from the synagogue leader's house saying to Jairus, "Your daughter has died. Why bother the teacher any longer?" But Jesus overheard the report and said to the synagogue leader, "Don't be afraid, just keep trusting." He didn't allow anyone to follow him except Peter, James, and John, James's brother. They came to the synagogue leader's house, and he saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "What's all this commotion and crying about? The child isn't dead, she's only sleeping." They laughed at him, but he threw them all out. Then, taking the child's parents and his disciples with him, he went to the room where the child was. Taking her hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Young woman, get up." Suddenly, the young woman got up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. They were shocked. He gave them strict orders that no one should know what had happened. Then he told them to give her something to eat. All right, so that is our passage. I'm going to set our timer for 5 minutes, and we'll see what we can say about this passage. So, Emily, what grabbed you from this passage? What stirred up a question or bothered you or encouraged you?
I think one of the things that has first stood out to me on this reading is the woman who comes to Jesus with the faith that just by touching him she'll be healed, or at least the hope. And then after she's healed, she approaches him and is full of fear. So I think the thing that stands out is just kind of the play, and it comes up again with Jesus speaking to Jairus and whoever else is gathered, just the interplay of faith and fear.
Yeah, that's interesting in the way in which the woman had the faith she would be healed just from the touch, but then she was still fearful of Jesus because she didn't know what would happen from that.
Right.
Yeah. I noticed, I think for one of the first times in this passage, the fact that this line about, I knew that the woman had suffered for many years, but that line about under the care of many doctors and had spent everything she had and she had gotten worse. Just how Mark in this passage it's not just about her health, but it's also about her whole life has been consumed by this illness. She has lost everything to it and has seen absolutely no progress. And the fact that, I think that Jesus for her is a last resort. And I think the same for Jairus. Jairus at this point, when his daughter is very ill and then dead, he has nothing else except to come to Jesus. And that kind of faith in the last resort of Jesus, I think is interesting in both of those stories.
Yeah. When he pointed that out, I guess it's verse 26. I pulled it up on my screen too, but she had suffered a lot under the care of many doctors and had spent everything she had without getting any better. It's interesting. This translation almost makes it seem like the process of unknowing or not being able to find a cure was just as painful for her, or as contributed just as much to the suffering as the bleeding itself.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting to think about how the healthcare system and people can get turned around in it while they're looking for answers, or they get sent to this doctor and without answers. Just that process can cause suffering.
Yeah, thinking about what you were saying before about listening to stories and paying attention to what's going on around us, I think that this is, a direct connection of sometimes it is about health and it is about, the person's body, but it's also just the toll and the emotional toll that it takes having to deal with all this and having your, everything consumed by going to many doctors and just trying to figure out what is going on. I know I've known family members and other people who just knowing what it is that's happening to their body can be such a peace. because it just allows them to have some sense of knowledge of what's going on. And I know little to nothing about the healthcare system of Jesus's day, but I know, I'm often overwhelmed in just my minor healthcare things that I've had to deal with, of just having to trust doctors and go from one place to the other, and to have this kind of relief from that this woman experiences immediately from Jesus, was such a miracle for her.
Yeah. Kind of makes me think too about the fear that she felt even after she had come into contact with Jesus initially. I mean, she approached Jesus as a healer, as a physician perhaps, and she had visited with lots of doctors trying to find answers. And if she hadn't been healed yet, you can kind of understand where she might be coming from, that she would still be afraid. Like, did this really work? Or,
Yeah.
Is he going to give me another answer that's not going to satisfy? So,
Yeah. One of the things I noticed in this passage is how embodied Jesus is, that it's about, he's in this crowd of people and somebody touches him and he's concerned about the touch. And then I'm interested, I don't know how much of this is the translation that we're reading, and how much of it is just the story, but the story with Jairus's daughter, of the daughter's dead. She's died, but Jesus says, no, she's just sleeping. And then when she gets up and he says, she's hungry, give her some food. Like, it's interesting to see this Jesus who is he's so aware of the small things around him. Like, that this girl has been in bed for who knows how long, who has been ill. She's hungry. Somebody get her something to eat. And just those small things that Jesus is aware of in this passage.
Yeah. Seems like there's definitely the spiritual side of this passage that, the first woman, or, well, I guess she's the second, because it kind of starts with Jairus' daughter and then it leaves that and then comes back to it. But the woman in the crowd, she senses in her body that she's healed. And Jesus also has this spiritual sense that, power has left him and healed someone. And then he's also very attuned to Jairus' daughter when seemingly no one else is. So yeah, just his awareness.
Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's 5 minutes. That's all the time we have to spend with this passage. This passage that I believe books have been written about just these verses. So definitely full of information, full of places to keep on talking about. But Emily, if you're going to revisit this passage this week, if you're going to spend any more time with it, where would you go next? What would you dig into more?
Gosh, probably the medical side of it, and the fear that can happen between physicians, and just like the authority piece, why she might have been so afraid to come to Jesus even after being healed. I don't know. I've got medical things on the brain. My sister is in medical school and she's taking a big test today. So.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I think for me, this is the second week in a row that I've been approached with this, with the embodied Jesus, this idea of really focusing on Jesus as a body, as someone who reacted physically and interacted physically with this world. And I want to spend a little bit more time with that, of kind of not allowing the grandeur of the Son of God on earth to overcome this idea that Jesus got hungry. And Jesus, maybe part of why he noticed this woman touch him is because there had been so many people who touched him, and he thought to himself, if one more person touches me, I'm going to lose it. And that one more touch was a little bit more than he expected. Just spending a little bit more time thinking about Jesus as an embodied person. So Emily, thank you so much for joining us here on this podcast and video series. I've really enjoyed spending a little bit of time with you talking about this passage. If people want to hear more from you and want to engage with your ministry a little bit more, is there a place online where they can find you?
Yeah, I guess the best place would just be the First Baptist Athens website. There's links to our worship services there that are on YouTube each week. And other than that, kind of a hermit.
That's great. I would encourage people to go to First Baptist Athens website and look around there. I know I've known Emily for a few years now, and I know that she's doing great work there and great ministry there. And I'm appreciative of our friendship and all that I've learned from her over the years. And so to everybody watching and listening, thank you for following with us. We encourage you to like and subscribe and tell your friends all about reading the Bible as easy-ish. And until we see you again,